Good morning, everyone. Bon dia a tothom. Buenos dias a todos y todas. On behalf of ENT, it is my pleasure to welcome you to another ENT online talk. For those who may not be familiar, we regularly organize online discussions covering various topics related to the environment. You can find these talks on our YouTube channel. So today we are delighted to have Patrizia Ziveri with us. She's an ICTA research professor at ICTA-UAB, where she leads the Marine and Environmental Biogeoscience Research Group. Among significant achievements, Patrizia led the first European research effort, coordinated research effort, to address ocean acidification in the Mediterranean Sea between 2011 and 2014. Additionally, she was the scientific director of the ICTA-UAB Center of Excellence Maria de Maezzo between 2015 and 2020. Today's presentation is entitled Actions of Cities and Regions in the Mediterranean Sea Area to Fight Sea Pollution. This study analyzes the accelerating accumulation of marine litter and plastics in the Mediterranean Sea, as well as the potential actions to tackle this problem. Following this introduction, we'll have approximately half an hour or 40 minutes of presentation, followed by 20 minutes of debate, more or less. Patrizia, thank you very much for accepting our invitation. We are quite honored to have you here today. So the floor is yours, and thank you everyone for being here.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me okay? Yes?
Yes.
Great. So thanks again for the invitation. Thanks to ANT and thanks also to Luis Campos. And I'm very pleased to be here today. I will share now my screen for my presentation. Just a sec. So my presentation today here in the seminar is focusing on some work that we have done, actually published last year. It was a study that was requested by the European Parliament and was targeting marine pollution in the Mediterranean Sea. So when they asked me, the request actually to me to perform this study, it was at the end of 2022 or so. And of course, I was a bit intimidated by the big topic of marine pollutions, because as you know, there are many pollutants. But then I also thought that there was a great opportunity for us really to try to influence legislation, because one of the goals for these actions was really to try to legislate more European countries in terms of like reducing the marine pollution in the Mediterranean Sea. And I did this work with some colleagues. One is Michael Grelot, that is also a researcher at ICTA, and Jorge Pato, that was a master student of our program, and he was an expert on international law. So this helped us also with the compilation of legislation related to this report. So before we actually going into the report, I would like also to highlight some examples, and this is a very, very known example from all of us living in Spain, but also internationally. And it was something that happened very recently. It was this spill of plastic pellets that happened in Galicia just a few months ago. And if you remember, this event was very, very well covered by the media. And it happens basically because there was an accident, and there was this cargo ship that lost 6 containers, and some of these containers contain plastic pellets. So this raw material, this is included in this microplastic category. So it's a few millimeter size spheres of plastics, and we're spilling in the sea, in the ocean, Atlantic Ocean, and because they are very light, they float, they eventually reach the land, and you find it in the beach. And they were like estimated 26 tons of plastic pellets that were spilled and eventually reaching the coast of Galicia and partly also Asturias. And just to understand a bit the complexity of the problem when we are dealing with marine pollution, in this case was marine pollution from the sea, we see that, for example, this investigation from the environmental agency was that just to know a bit more who is accountable for this disaster, was that we had this manufacturer company that was from Poland, but in fact the pellets were manufactured in India, and the cargo ship had a flag from Liberia, but in fact the ship was a vessel chartered by a Danish company, and this vessel was supposed to reach Rotterdam, but then the accident happened here. So just to understand, I mean, we have very local impact of marine pollution, and in this case of plastic pellets, but the problem is global and actually complex. And when you look at just the topic of marine pollution, it goes in this big and important topic of environmental pollution, and specifically for the marine environment, the marine pollution is really linked to basically us wasting, basically dumping waste into the sea. We saw just now an example of marine pollution coming from the sea, but in fact has been estimated, and we know that very well, the most of the marine pollution, it comes from land, and there are many different sources, but of course the most important one are the industrial, also of course urbanization, urban waste discharge, we go also sewage, agriculture also runoff. They bring all kinds of course, fertilizer, pesticides, and then also from the sea, where you have specific anthropogenic activity, like for shipping, also fisheries, aquaculture, and maritime traffic. So I just talk a bit about the wastewater discharge, and when you look at the actually the impact of wastewater discharge in terms of marine pollution, is quite shocking, because at the global scale, it has been estimated that about 80% of wastewater discharge from anthropogenic activity is actually not treated. So there are all kinds of pollutants that are entering in the sea, like from municipal waste, and also you have direct discharge into the ocean, and they bring all kinds of course, toxic chemical, nutrients, microplastic, heavy metals, and so on. And when then we look into the Mediterranean Sea, the topic today is actually the Mediterranean Sea. Up to 58% of the municipal solid waste collected is still disposed in open dump sites. Even if there are regulations, you have to also remember, and I will also tell you a bit more later about this problem, that it's not really a problem, but it's a reality. The Mediterranean Sea, in the Mediterranean Sea, we have 22 countries, and most of these countries are not European, so they don't really follow the legislation, the European legislation. Also, these nice pictures is, and we talk more about this, is about marine microplastic, and we know now that there are these trillion of microplastic particles in the ocean. They are potentially treating marine life, but we also now we know they are treating also our life as humans, and we also know that the ending point of this cycle of microplastic in the ocean is eventually the sediments, and we even recently demonstrated that the microplastic that was deposited in the seafloor has tripled in the last 20 years. So it's really mimicking the production, the global production of plastics on land. So there is really a strong relationship. And also very recently, for example, very close to Barcelona in the Delta del Ebro, we also show that all the aquatic species that in the river mouths of the Delta del Ebro, and also other estuary systems that we have tested, they were contaminated by microplastics. So it's a very, very known problem, not only by scientists, but by everyone. And I will not go into that, but just to highlight the importance of this problem related to the big topic of environmental pollution and marine pollution. We know now that from many medical studies that they have an impact on humans, and they have multiple impacts. So I'm not going to go into this, but there are many different issues with, even with plastic now. We know there is an issue with the impact on the cardiovascular system, in the inflammatory status, metabolic distortion, and so on. So it's really a priority in the agenda of environmental agency and governmental agency as well. So now we are going to the topic of today, that is this report that we did for the European Parliament. And I structured the presentations in these 5 main topics. So where we go and talk a bit about, in general, about the issue with marine pollutants in the Mediterranean Sea. Then we will specifically focus on an important topic, that is marine litter and waste in the Mediterranean. And then we will go more towards the legislation and understanding about tools that the European put in place, or they want to implement it to fight marine pollution, the cohesion environmental policy, and then some recommendation, and hopefully also some discussion with you all. So now we are in the Mediterranean. So the Mediterranean, as you all know, is an enclosed basin, and they communicate with the ocean only through the Gibraltar Strait and the Suez canals. But the Gibraltar Strait is really the main channels with the Atlantic Ocean. And because this the Mediterranean is anti-estuarine circulation, so that means that you have water entering at the surface and then getting modified, and eventually you have these outflows, but only partially, of course. Here in the Gibraltar Strait, many particles, they get accumulated here, and unfortunately also pollutants. And of course, in addition to that, there is not only the hydrodynamic of the Mediterranean Sea that is making the sea as an hotspot for marine pollutions, but also the fact, of course, that there are millions and millions of people living around the coast, particularly in the northwestern Mediterranean, but of course not only. There are many major cities also in North Africa related to this high population density. So there is really a waste, this large population that is also generating a very large amount of waste. And so there is an issue here with, as I mentioned, with marine pollution. And in addition, of course, there are many other stressors, and we are not going to talk about that precisely for this presentation. But of course, there is also the impact of climate change that is combined with marine pollution, is also amplifying the effect of these drivers. So there are diverse forms of pollutants. There is physical, chemical, biological, emerging contaminants, and we will talk a bit about some of this. And as already mentioned in my introduction, that most of the pollutants are actually coming from land, and then it's been estimated about 80% it comes from land, and the rest is coming from the sea. So when we look at the marine pollutants in the Mediterranean Sea, of course, there is a strong link between the water body ecological status, so mainly rivers, they reach eventually the Mediterranean Sea, and not only. So in these pictures here, you see the estimated water body ecological status for different regions, and you see in red corals are the ones that are in very bad status, and you see there are several ones in the Mediterranean. This is only for European countries, of course, but there are many more countries, as mentioned, in the Mediterranean. So the ecological status in this case has been evaluated only for European country. So there are many urban areas, the lack of adequate sewage treatment facility, so this is leading to discharge of untreated wastewater into water bodies. Also, of course, there are agricultural practices such as using fertilizer and pesticide that also contributed to water pollution, and these chemicals can enter water body through runoff or bleaching, leading, for example, to the enhanced growth of harmful algae, and also depletion of oxygen at the local level, for example, and of course this harms aquatic life. Another thing that for example, for Spain, that there is also an issue, of course, with groundwaters. And for example, in Mallorca Islands, the groundwater has been found to contain high levels of nitrate, up to 700 milligram per liter, and the aquifer that are frequently used for irrigation are vulnerable and have low replacement capacity, resulting in the presence of nitrate and groundwater. So there are many issues related, of course, to the high population and the waste generations. And in addition to that, and you will see a bit more later, Mediterranean, as mentioned, is a very, very touristic region. So the number of people, of course, in many places, like, for example, islands, but not only, all the coastline of most of the Mediterranean, is really increasing their population and their stress related to waste generation and eventually also pollution. I forgot also to mention briefly, because here I say climate change, and climate change is also an amplificator of, can be an amplificator of marine pollution. For example, we see now the water quality due to the drought and also the aquifer that have been impacted, for example, by the drought that is happening now. So in terms of one of the focus of this report was really on marine litter. So first we actually revised the status of the marine pollution, mainly related to European country, but also we have to focus on marine litter, because as I said, one of the main problem is that is the waste generation that is ending in the eventually in the sea. And there were several initiatives that actually monitor the marine litter generation and the marine litter and the source of marine litter in the Mediterranean Sea. Specifically, there were like more than 1,000 monitoring sites that they were studied by this fourth initiative. And there were like a very large collection of items related to marine litter in the beach around the coast of Spain, France, Italy, and also Greece. And if you consider the main source of marine litter, in the two main sources are the beaches on one hand, and also the mismanaged waste from city mainly in the other hand. And so when you look at the distribution, so there were like very good coverage, of course, of sites. And there's been monitored that about 80 to 90% of all these marine litters it was plastic. So there is a very large component of plastics in this. So unfortunately, the Mediterranean is considered as one of the most affected regions by marine litter and marine pollution in general. And the annual plastic leakage is estimated to have been about 230,000 tons of plastic per year, and 94% of which consist of macroplastic. And you see here, it was an interesting study because it has been this item has been studying in detail, and the 10 most abundant items that were found in this monitoring exercise represented 66.4% of the item collected. And actually, one of the first items that is a bit crazy, but is expected as well, were the cigarette butts. So cigarette butts and filters are considered for litters that beach users are generating, and there were like super high number of the cigarette butt in the beach, and 7 out of these 10 items that they were collected are single-use plastic items. And also another results that were coming out from this study is that tourism and recreational use of beaches, is the main source of beach litter, account for about 45% of the items collected. And as a second sector, the way behind tourism is fisheries and aquaculture, with account about 7% of all the items that were found. Also, in the monitors that we did in many islands in the Mediterranean, there were also actually consistently plastic pellets, so the same plastic pellets that we found after the disaster in Galicia and Asturias. They were also found everywhere in the Mediterranean as well. So there is always a leaking of, unfortunately, of these plastic pellets mainly from cargoes that are transporting this raw material from the manufacturing to the industry that are building the different items. So when we then move and we see the marine litter in the Mediterranean Sea again, I just mentioned that so the range in marine plastic pollution generated per year is between 150,000 to 610,000 tons of plastic pollution every year that is leaking. And in most of the Mediterranean country, the root cause of plastic pollution are found in the increase of plastic use, unsustainable consumption patterns, ineffective and inefficient waste management of plastic and plastic waste management. And we see that the main pathways are, as I mentioned, the beach, but also the river and also the sewage systems. Also, we see that 21% of the wastewater, 25% in the southern countries, undergoes only basic treatments, and less than 8%, 1% in the southern country, undergoes tertiary treatment. So, of course, there is an issue also with the infrastructure that are necessary for dealing with the waste generation and eventually also with the plastic leaching into the sea. And coastal cities and towns, so less than 23 kilometers from the coast, are responsible for about 35% of the total microplastic leakage in the Mediterranean Sea. And the remaining 65% is generated further inland and carried by surface runoff directly toward the marine environment. So in terms of EU tools that has been put in place in the past, actually there are a lot of effort that has been put in place by the European Commissions to fight since several years. And some of these strategies included, of course, the cooperation. They try to implement cooperation in the Mediterranean Sea. We have a shared sea, and it's very dynamic sea. So for example, we saw from modeling exercise that from the Delta del Ebro, like fragments of plastic can reach Sicily in just a few months. So it's really a shared sea, like all the sea, but Mediterranean in particular. So we need to have common agreement and cooperations, and in terms of like implementation strategy for reducing and fighting marine pollution. Also, the EU strategy target the production model, consumption pattern, and waste disposal practices is something that will take some time, but is absolutely necessary, because we cannot only targeting the waste disposal practices and also recycling, because this is absolutely not sufficient. We really need to change a model of the way we are producing and the way we are using these different items, particularly for pollutions, for plastic, but not only. And another thing is that, so the EU mandatory policies with specific target to reduce pollution have resulted in positive outcomes at the local level, as seen in, for example, in the directive of plastics. And for example, we analyzed the most the Single-Use Plastic Directive, which banned the 10 most common plastics on beaches, such as straw, plastic bottles, but also in many places now, cigarettes are not allowed, and so on. So, and there are many examples, local examples related to that. Also ban on specific cosmetic products and other substances that are included in cosmetics that are actually that are included in this microplastic category. And also, for example, restriction of on detergent and cleaning products. So in terms of cohesion and mandatory policies, we see that even if there were a lot of efforts, and I think if we go back, this very important initiative of Barcelona Convention and also the amendment that happened afterwards, it was started like many years ago in 1976, the first Barcelona Convention, and was really done for the protection of the Mediterranean Sea against pollutions, and then was amended later on in 85 or so. So this has been really a pillar for reducing pollution, but of course we see now this is not enough, and we need continuous revision of this and update of this kind of policy. And we actually, doing this work, we really see that there were some major difficulties that we found in the cohesion of the cohesion policies. One is to achieve consensus among all parties involved. Negotiation between different countries or our groups can be complex, and it can be difficult to find common ground. And also, even when agreements have clear enforcement mechanisms such as fines or sanctions, enforcing compliance can be very difficult, particularly in the case of non-state actors who may be difficult to hold accountable. And also the integration of non-European Mediterranean country into regional policy also can be challenging sometimes, as you can understand. And the majority of Mediterranean countries, as I said, do not belong to European Commission, so this is also a challenge, and do not have the same environmental regulation, neither the resources nor the infrastructure of the European countries. So really cooperation is key, and like putting in place actions that can really help the cooperation and basically the improvement of infrastructure. And different programs that have been implemented to cooperation that include, for example, citizen science, environmental technology, the creation of protected areas, and also this cooperation and cohesion program. So in terms of recommendation, I would say the strategy for policy recommendation that we developed in the report included 3 stages. So one was the discovery phase, and I will give some examples. So the discovery phase, in which the issue is recognized as a problem and controversies surround its significance. So basically the overall strategy was to look at the state of knowledge, so the scientific knowledge, how much quantitative data we have on specific pollutants, and also the state of legislation related to the specific pollutant and implementation. So one, it was the discovery phase, so for example, for emerging pollutants. The second one was the political and decision-making phase, in which the problem is framed in policy dimension and the legislative framework is established. And finally is the management phase. So when we already know there is a pollutant, we are very much aware, and policy decision and management practices are put in place. So in terms of discovery phase is the first one. So the discovery phase is in which the issue is recognized as a problem and controversy surrounds its significance. And for example, the analysis of plastic should focus not only on the most commonly found plastic litter, but also on the variety of unnecessary products that are easily detected in daily life. And if we specifically think about microplastic, in 2023, the European Commission adopted kind of scholar restrictions on microplastic, but in fact, there's not really a legislation done yet on microplastic. It's a very difficult topic. And there was a proposal for a regulation on preventing plastic pellet losses to the environment. But we saw also from the first example how difficult it is somehow to make it specific agency or specific companies accountable for the problem of this plastic pellet pollution. And the idea is really this action that are directly contributing to this reaching the 30% reduction target for microplastic releases set out in the Zero Plastic Action Plan. The second phase is the one that I mentioned, the decision-making phase, and the challenges in managing, for example, water pollution in the Mediterranean regions lie not only in a lack of information and policy, but rather in the implementation of these policies by the signatory countries. So we find out more and more that there are the action or the information or the policy sometimes even put in place, but the implementation is very scarce and not very efficient. So this is particularly evident given the varying levels of economic and developments among the Mediterranean nations. And for example, here we provide an example for aquaculture. Aquaculture is becoming the hope for food from the sea, kind of, and it's supposed to double by the 2050 or so. But aquaculture, of course, can also have a lot of linked issues related to marine pollution, like eutrophication, nutrients, and even plastics and so on. So there is really a need to focus very much on sustainable aquaculture and also limiting the link with the pollution. Then finally, the third phase is the management phase that I mentioned. And so the efforts, funds, and innovation are already made, and we lack of coherence and effectiveness in basically implementing the action of the management phase. There is really, the surveillance is actually often not enough, and we need really effective ways of implementation at the local and regional level. And for example, there are like surveillance of debris and litter in the main Mediterranean commercial routes is one thing that we need to do. There is a need also monitoring much more the impact of tourism, and now we could reduce the impact of tourism on waste generations, and they can cause a lot of problems at the local level, also at the Mediterranean level in terms of marine pollutions. For example, we did the study on Mediterranean islands related to tourism and the impact of tourism on waste generation in coastal sites and beaches. And we just saw that just implementing some actions related to awareness of tourism about their impact on the environment, it could drastically reduce actually the waste generation on the beach and the mismanagement of waste on the beach. And finally, also we need to improve knowledge about waste streams, build common guidelines, and improve synergy among Mediterranean island communities. And here I want to provide just some examples of best practices. So as you can understand, the issue of marine pollution and the big problem of environmental pollution is something at the global scale, but have very, very detrimental impact at the local level. So we also need to act very much at the local level to reduce the marine pollution and the waste generation and the impact. And one positive thing, one positive action in terms of marine pollution was the ban persistent organic pollutants. in the Mediterranean. And so this was actually successful, and the cooperation program started actually in 1971 with the Mediterranean Sea Initiative for the Prevention and Control of Persistent Organic Pollutants. And the waste, there was a waste initiated under this, then was initiated under the Stockholm Convention on Persistent Organic Pollutants, which was adopted then much later on in 2001 and entered in force in 2004. So you can understand how long is the process, but it was a very important one. Also, we have example at the national level. For example, in France, they are doing a lot of action to reduce actually plastics pollution. For example, in this case, in cosmetics containing microplastic. There were several also regional level. For example, in Sardinia, to restricted the access to iconic beaches by tourists. So we have a charge fee. So you have a limited number of people that can visit this pristine kind of environment. And also there are example at the city level in Valencia, where they implemented a pilot return and reward project called Reciclos. And in this specific example, where the number of bottles obtained in 2020 was about 10% higher compared to 2019. And also finally here at the more low, at the Catalan level, there were in Nice in France, but also Barcelona, they banned smoking in the beach. And also in Sabadell and Tarragona, added nets to switch system to intercept and retain solid waste when spillways are in operation. And this awareness campaign that was oriented to beach user and tourists allowed to reduce about 50% of litters associated with the recreational use of beach. So there are a few examples here. And for Tarragona specifically, it was estimated that the system of nets avoided the release of 3 tons of waste through sewage system per year. So, and with this, I would like to end, and I would also like to quote something that I think is very significant for all of us, that we cannot get through a single day without having an impact on the world around us. And what we make, what we do makes a difference, and we have to decide what kind of difference we want to make. And there was a quote from Jane Goodall. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Patrizia. Very interesting presentation issue, and of course, a very troubling issue that we are facing at the Mediterranean Sea, but at the world level. I have a couple of questions, but I will first open the room to anyone that wants to ask you something. We have exactly more or less 20 minutes for this part of the discussion, so I will open the room for questions. Karim?
Yeah.
Thank you. Please go ahead.
The first one is more a remark, because I was before working with the ecological status according to the Water Framework Directive, and it looks like all the northern countries are the worst pollutants of all, but this is more about that hydropower is very big there, and that most rivers don't have a natural flow anymore, so there's no fish migration possible. But then I'm very curious about you showed a picture, like a slide about the marine litter in the Mediterranean Sea, and based on a publication of what was the name?
Sorry, this one?
Boucher
No.
and Plant. Like, yeah, exactly. That one is very interesting. Because I'm curious, like, for example, in Greece, the distribution of dots, and also like in Italy seems very bad compared to Spain, for example. Like, do you know maybe how this was calculated? Like, and also that northern Italy is as bad as southern Italy, basically. And
yeah, I think there are like some errors here for sure in this estimate. Also because there are very, very few data in North Africa, as you can expect. Most of the data are from the Northwestern Mediterranean Sea and some European countries. So there is like a modeling component was done. So yeah, for sure there are some issues. What I know also depends on the on the accuracy of sometimes of the monitoring. Sometimes it's done by voluntaries, and so the error can be larger. The way the way it's done is the monitoring is done. So, but yeah.
And when it comes to like better waste management systems, do you promote rather like local initiatives, like, or because there are laws obviously also in Italy, they have the same European legislations as all other EU member states. Like, how would you recommend tackling this?
I mean, for sure we need both. I mean, we need local initiative, but they are not sufficient. Because, for example, we need for sure more efficient infrastructure for reducing the impact of wastewater discharge, for example, into the sea. So there are many actual legislation that are already put in place, but as I mentioned, they are difficult to be implemented. So they're like, when I say 58% of the municipal solid waste is still disposed in open dumpsy, that's really an issue, of course. And this can be done only with new infrastructure or more efficient infrastructure.
And what's your opinion on biodegradable plastics for the use in agriculture, but also aquaculture? Like, I mean, because there's a lot of spills also there, and especially also in aquaculture, and it's hard to control it. So, but
I'm not an expert of biodegradable plastic, but what I hear from conferences and from specific talks that are dealing with this kind of biodegradable plastic, that biodegradable plastic is a problem almost as plastics, because it's entering the food web and it's not fully biodegradable, or there are many issues related to how biodegradable is biodegradable in the natural environment. So yes, so, and also can absorb like other pollutants, can concentrate. That's the other issue I didn't touch at all. There's marine litter, mainly plastic, in the natural environment, in the water system, the aquatic system. They build very quickly what we call a biofilm. So this organic layer that we know now that is concentrating pollutants, for example, heavy metals. Now we're also looking into like how much is concentrated in pesticides and other type of contaminants. So it can be really can be really a problem, of course, for the marine ecosystem, for animals that live at sea and so on.
Also invasive species now. Like.
Yeah, and another thing we studied that we did not in the Mediterranean, but in Brazil, we really demonstrated through modeling that the marine plastic litter or marine litter in general can be a major way in which invasive species can travel for very long distance and reach like new coasts and new places and become also invasive. So not only animal species.
Okay, thank you, Karin and Patrizia.
Thank you for the question.
Anyone else has a question?
Hi, Patrizia.
Hi,
I'm Rosaria. Yes.
Hi.
Well, talking about the ban that was put in Barcelona for cigarette, for smoking, I would like to ask you if you think that apart from introducing banning some activities or whatever, if you think that it's also needed to introduce this kind of bans together with fines, because sometimes what I see, but this is in general for any kind of policy recommendation that is introduced or some ban, if it is not linked to some fine, it's really difficult to reach, well, to be respected, let's say. I know that is also a matter of awareness and increase awareness among people, so it's also a matter of time. But what I saw in Barcelona, at least at the beginning of introduced for when the banner was introduced, was, you know, well, I will keep smoking because no one is going to controlling me, you know. So, and no one will find me. So this is just in general. What do you think about it?
Yeah, I think one of the issues is surveillance, because I mean, think about, like, so the beach, the night. I mean, if you don't have surveillance, unfortunately, yeah, many people will not really have the. I mean, many people will not do it. I mean, what, in a positive note, I will say that this awareness campaign, at least during the day with families and so on, that are using the beach and I just don't think about the impact that they have on the environment and on marine litter. I mean, for the awareness campaign that we did in many islands, in this, they were done by local organization, local institution, NGO, mainly about, I mean, to beach users. So this awareness campaign to beach users really allowed to reduce by 50%, I mean, the beach litter that was related to recreational use. So, I mean, just the awareness campaign. Of course, I think the problem, if you don't keep doing this, unfortunately, people tend to forget and become, yeah, they need to become something like that people do naturally. You know, don't drop cigarette butts on the floor. It's so easy. I mean, I think it's so easy to reduce this. I mean, this type of marine litter, I would expect to, but yeah. Still, I mean, I see a lot of people just don't do it, even now, yeah, in other places, not only on the beach. But I agree that it should be both. I mean, awareness campaign and surveillance and fines. Sure.
Thank you, Rosaria and Patrizia.
Thank you,
Anyone else for another question?
Maybe I can also put a question. Thanks, Patrizia, for the very informative and also worrying presentation. Given your knowledge on the fact of marine litter pollution, but also on the different policies that have been trying to address this issue, my question would be, if you were facing a mayor or maybe a regional responsible for waste management, which would be your top recommendations? I know I can imagine this can vary very much from the starting point, but based on your experiences, which would be your recommendations? And then I also would like to ask you for a very specific measure, which is the introduction of underground rainwater deposits for preventing direct runoff in case of episodes of severe storms. I would like to know your opinion on that measure as well.
So the first one, as you said, I mean, it's very much depending on where you are. Of course, if I can generalize the answer, I mean, I just say before, the main source of pollutants are industry. So I will not, I mean, I think industry, they need to be clean and they need to be accountable for their pollution, seriously. Another, of course, we see a lot of microplastic. There are fibers, and a lot of fibers come from wastewater discharge. So I think wastewater discharge, wastewater in general, I think that's also another. And we go back to the beach again, and to the fact that Mediterranean is so touristic and the impact of the mass tourism on marine litter. I think I will invest also on more sustainable tourism and kind of clean tourism, responsible use of the resources and so on. Of course, it's a touchy topic, and you don't want to reduce drastically the tourism because it's an important economic sector, but it needs to be redesigned a bit how we do tourism. And the second question, I'm not sure I can answer, but it was about groundwater. Sorry, I didn't understand.
Yes, I know of some cities, Barcelona, for example, that in the past have created several underground rainwater collection tanks or deposits to prevent direct runoff of water in the case of storms. Because when there are such massive flows, the water does not go through the wastewater treatment plant, but as a direct runoff to the sea. So I just was asking if you had any idea of how this is working.
Yeah, I don't know very much about this, but I think everything we can do to prevent pollutants to reach the sea, I think they are very welcome. So I think this is something that, particularly under climate change, where extreme events will increase their frequency and their intensity, we need to be much more prepared than what we are now to avoid all kind of consequences that we will have, not only marine pollution, but yeah, marine pollution is the topic of today. So for sure, marine pollutant reaching the sea and eventually us too.
Thank you, Ignacio and Patrizia. Now, Veronica, you have a question. Please go ahead.
Comment on this comment from Ignacio about this underground deposit for water to be stored while the facilities, the wastewater treatment plants are treating other water, no, because they cannot treat so a flow that is so big. So what these tanks do is to retain our weight, and then little by little they treat it. The problem of this deposit is that they are really expensive to build underground. They need to be really big, and there is where I see the importance of the cities and the land to be able to filter the water of the rain, no? Because now we can see that all the cities have a lot of cement, and all this water cannot be filtered into the land. And so the natural-based solutions can also be used to stop at least or I don't know, reduce the runoff of the wastewater going to the sea directly. But then my question was more on the importance of the policies related to the extended producer responsibility. No, like as you see, like the cigarette butts, for example, this is really easy to charge the producers of the producer of this and the consumer, and then they can pass this cost to the consumer of these products, and then that they can get the responsibility of removing this from the environment or stopping them to arrive to the environment, no? And there I see that there is an initiative in Catalonia that I don't know how it's evolving, but they wanted to put a deposit on the cigarette butts that they were supposed to pay with when they buy the cigarettes in the kiosk. And then I'm sure that maybe you cannot put a fine for smoking, but if each cigarette butt has a deposit that has to be bring back to the shop, I think that we won't see so many cigarette butts in the environment. So I would like to know if you know about this initiative somewhere else, about also in the case of the fiber that you mentioned, no, like for example, if France had a extended responsibility on laundry in washing machines, that they have to put filters for microplastics, and so at the end is making the producer the responsible of this pollution. No, I don't know if you know some cases of best practice or on this.
No, I mean, we listed some kind of positive example that could be embraced by other local entities at the Mediterranean level. But if we go back to the problems and to the origin of the problems, as usual, it's much easier to prevent than to cure, to take care. For example, going back to the first example of Galicia, you know, there were a lot of people that went there to try to help, but then only about 20% of the micro pellets, I mean, these plastic pellets were like actually removed. So we really need to think about more smartly about what we are doing with the production, for example.
Yes.
And I think, of course, us as a consumer, the way we consume is another big thing, and then the way we dispose what we are not using anymore. I mean, there are like these three main components. So I don't know. Cigarette butts, of course, is a big problem, and hopefully it can be solved just with the combination of awareness campaign and many different initiatives. But yeah, there is much more to be solved.
Thank you, Veronica. Patrizia. Karen, you have the final question.
Yeah, no, I was just about
No,
this
no.
cigarette butts. Actually, it should be a part of this SUP, the single-use plastics directive, the extended producer responsibility for cigarette butts. But the question is implementation, and what does it mean? Because Veronica was basically suggesting to bring it back like a deposit scheme. Like, this is very complex other topic. Like, if it just means that part of the money that we now pay for cigarettes, if we buy cigarettes, is supposedly used for cleaning it up. The question is in enforcement, and if they're just giving some money to the local street cleaners and like no extra money charged for that. Like, I mean, this would be actually interesting.
No, the thing is that the people, once they smoke, they put the bag inside the box, and then they bring the box to the kiosk where they bought it. So at least it will be collected, properly collected.
Yeah, that would be interesting. But like,
but I mean, in some countries it doesn't even happen. I would say that there are countries where you just don't see it. You don't see this kind of behavior.
Yeah.
So it's really like a behavioral change that has to happen.
Or rise the price of cigarettes. I think this is quite connected. Like, they're like crazy expensive and it's forbidden everywhere. So.
But there's much more than cigarettes, huh?
Yeah.
I mean,
well, it was the top
much more. But it's just top of items, yes. And but yeah, there's much more than that.
But deposit return schemes in general will help. Like, now in Romania, they introduced it, so there will be for sure less plastic bottles on the beach. I think this is definitely helping.
Okay. Well, I think we have 1 minute. I will squeeze it up. My question there. During the work that you did and finalizing this project, were you in contact with other initiatives at the world level? Did you find some similarities regarding the results with other studies in other world regions?
Yeah, I mean, there are similarities for sure, but there are also differences. And honestly, we mainly focus on the Mediterranean and your other European countries. So not only in the Mediterranean. I think Mediterranean and Europe in particular is quite advanced compared to most of the countries in the world related to legislation and try to reduce, pollution, marine pollution, and specifically plastic pollution. So, yeah, I think, I don't have any good other example from other places.
I think that, well, on EMTS, waste management is one of our topic. We'll follow this troubling issue as well. We'll follow also your work, Patrizia. Thank you very much for your important effort and work, and for being here today, and to everyone to be also here and to participate in this online session. As you know, and as I referred at the beginning, you can watch this and the previous online talks in our YouTube channel. So Patrizia, once again, thank you very much for being here. It was a pleasure to see you again. We'll be in touch.
Thank you very much. Thank you all.
Thank you everyone for being here. Take care.